Hi, Peter.
Hello, Volodymyr. Do I say that right?
Yeah, my name is Vladimir. Peter, could you please tell us how PiratesAhoy was created and who developed the website?
Okay, so first I have to say that at the time I was not actually there. I joined about a year later or so. So it's all basically hearsay from the article that I sent you. I'll try to give a short summary of what I understand of it. So that was the original Sea Dogs game, which I think a lot of your viewers will be familiar with. What I understand, it was like the first 3D pirate game ever. It's kind of similar to Sid Meier's Pirates, but 3D. And yeah, so from what I understand, the original Sea Dogs was in gameplay somewhat similar to Sid Meier's Pirates, but the first 3D game. So it was quite an innovative game. And then from what I understand, I never played it, but I heard a lot of positive things about it. So from what I understand, it was quite well received, quite a popular game. And so a sequel was being made, which was obviously going to be called Sea Dogs 2. It was never released in the Western world as Sea Dogs 2, but while that was being made, there were Western modders working together. And I think they called themselves the League of Independent Buccaneers. They had this community that they called LIB Island. And that's what I hear from it. And apparently they had just a tremendous fun, just had laughs all over the place. Then at some point they got word that Sea Dogs 2 was going to be renamed to Pirates of the Caribbean to tie in with the Disney Curse of the Black Pearl movie. I'm not entirely sure what their response was, but I do know that by the time the game was released, they were a bit disappointed that there wasn't a lot of support for the game. And so Keith and William, I do know their last names, but for the sake of privacy, since they didn't give me their permission, I'll just stick to their first names. They created the PiratesAhoy website, which was intended as a community website for everybody who wanted to do modding on the original Pirates of the Caribbean game. And though we over the years we expanded to do other things for a while as well, and we kept up with the new pirate games, and we've done modding for some of the newer pirate games as well. But on the whole, we started as a Pirates of the Caribbean game modding support and modding community, and that's what we still are today primarily. That's basically how it started. It was so it was in the time of Keith and William, and there were a whole bunch of other cool people there. Like the main person who was doing the actual modding and combining all the mods from people was Nathan Kell, the great Nathan Kell, as I like to call him. There were also such great people as Tagar. I think he was from Scandinavia. He wasn't one of the modders, but he was always keeping the community together, getting all the latest news. Then there was Catalina the Pirate. She was a big moderator. She always kept the atmosphere happy and always ensuring that there was plenty of laughs to go around. So then for me, myself, I actually came from the Virtual Sailor community, which was a community for a sailing simulator where you could make your own 3D ships and put them in. And I did a bit of that. I was quite involved in that community. I made a couple of ships. You can still find them online. I had a website where you could find all the ships that people had made, all the sailing areas that people had made. But that community, it was at the time, when I first started there, it was a great place to be. But at some point, it started to feel not quite right anymore. That was the same time that the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie was released. And I went to that movie, not entirely sure what to expect. And I came out of the cinema going like, wow, that was an awesome movie. That was absolutely great at the best time. So I was interested in pirates and ships always. Games also, played all sorts of stuff. Never a pirate game though. So I knew that there was a Sea Dogs game. I thought, well, maybe at some point I should try that. It sounds pretty good. And then I heard that there was a Pirates of the Caribbean game. I thought, oh, might be interesting at some point. And then one day, a year later, maybe a year later or so, I was in a toy store and I saw the original Pirates of the Caribbean game in basically a bargain bin. I think when it was released, it was like 40, 50 euros, or maybe guilders still at the time. Now it must have been euros. But already a year later, the price had dropped to 15 euros, 1.5, which is quite a shocking price drop in that amount of time. So clearly the game was not very well received, but I thought it might be interesting. So I pick up the game, install it, play it, but actually, this is quite a lot of fun. I look online, I find some separate mods from people. People were still doing a lot of separate mods at the time. Somebody had made, I can't remember his name, somebody had made an automatic combining thing, so you could take certain mods and compile like your own mod pack using that tool, as long as the separate mods didn't change the same code. That would always cause conflicts and things blowing up. So I made for my own, I took the features that I thought were the most interesting, I put them in my own game. I had like a slightly improved version of my own game. At the same time, I saw on this Pirates of the Caribbean website, PiratesAhoy website, that hey, they're doing this mod pack thing, calling it the build mod. I think they were on version 10 by then already. And I wanted to try it, but I tried it and it didn't work. Because turns out there are plenty of different language releases. And obviously there was a Russian release, because the game was, as I think your viewers already know, the game was made by Akela in Russia. So there was a Russian release, and there was an English release, there was a Spanish release, a French release, I think. Not sure about any others, maybe a German release. It turns out there were also two different English releases. There were an American release and there was a European release. And the PiratesAhoy community was set up by William and Keith, who were both American, and so they worked primarily on the American release. So all us Europeans, we couldn't play their mod pack, as great as it was. So I was stuck with just doing my own thing. But then the big moment came, and the PiratesAhoy community, Nathan Kell, had compiled build 11, which was the first release that had localization support. So suddenly you could use the build mod on any language edition. If your game was not English, it would translate it into English. So if you were a Russian player and didn't understand English, you were pretty much screwed. But at least for us European people who were fine with English, we could start using it. And so I did. I downloaded build 11, installed it, played it. I'm like, oh, this is pretty awesome. In the meantime, PiratesAhoy community continues and getting up to build 12. So I installed build 12, quite a nice step forward again. And people went, continued and made some more changes. And I think it was build 12 where I started to get a bit involved in the community. I signed up to the forum and can still find my very first post where I said, okay, it's pretty great, but I've got ideas and suggestions, and how about this and how about that? And they were very welcoming to me, the community, and said, well, maybe we do something with it, or maybe you could do something with it. And then I think one of the first things I did myself is I created the installer for build 12.1, so that people could play the stuff from build 12 with a little bit extra. And then as build 12 was released and we're basically in the build 13 phase, I started making the zip file. And every time somebody made something cool, I added it to the zip file, because I always wanted to be up to date. And so many people were doing so many cool things, like just thinking about Couch Captain Charles and his special weapon assembly kit, or the direct sale mod, that was a very popular one. The building set, which is completely bizarre, it's all still in the mod. Then there was Alan Smithy, he called himself. He always put in the most crazy things. First he started with reasonably normal stuff, such as the blacksmiths. But then later on he added the apothecary, which got a bit sillier, where you could buy a jar of bloodworms. One of the things that unfortunately never made it into the mod, because he didn't quite finish it, was the fish sword. So you could whack other NPCs over the head with like gory smelling fish. Like that's the level of hilarity that we were coming at. So all of that went into my zip file, and then at some point we were in touch with also the Russian community, and I think it was Alexis Bay at the time, and he gave us permission to use the resources that they made for their Russian Parts of the Caribbean mod. So obviously we're very grateful for that. And one of the things they did was they made a world map that actually approximates the real Caribbean world map instead of like a fantasy world. And build 13, we added that one in. So cword.ru. Thank you very much for that one and everything else, but also that one. So we added that in, and then we released build 13, and that was basically the first mod pack release that was compiled by me. So I compiled the mod pack, I put everything that people did together. I didn't actually do a lot of the modding myself, it was mainly work by other people, and released it build 13. That was a pretty big step forward, but I'd say it was still on the level of a mod for the original game. As we continued build 14 phase, I actually finished my studies, my secondary school, my maritime academy, and I started working at sea. So for 4 months a year, I was 4 months at a time, 8 months a year. 4 months I was away, 2 months I was back. I was very, very, very busy with work at sea, and I barely had an internet connection. But of course, the community still had to be running. So like once a week or so, I would log in on the Wi-Fi. And I would open every forum thread that had been updated, quickly shut off the internet connection because every second cost money, open a notepad file, start writing my comments, and then I was actually in contact with Captain McGee from Australia, and I would take my text file with all my comments, I would send them to him, and he would actually post it on the forum for me, just to save me the time so I could focus on, keeping the 2,000 people on the cruise ship safe. But at the same time, the community kept very much alive. But of course, the compiling work also had to be done. So Pirate KK from Poland, he was kind enough to take that onto him, and he did a lot of incredible work. He did the different flags mod, he did the periods mod, the storylines mod, and those are really, really the features that I think I'm most proud of in what we now call New Horizons. That's also the reason why we have started adding so much content, not just more ships, but more features, like really changing the structural gameplay, and also more side quests, but not just side quests, main storylines with all sorts of different stories with different main characters, different sorts of gameplay, really a huge wide variety made by so many different people. And that's when eventually we realized, you can't really pretend that this is still a simple mod for the original game. This deserves a real name. So we had the community vote, and had plenty of people suggest names, and in the end we went with on the one hand, slightly cliche name, on the other one, completely perfect name, New Horizons. So ever since we started calling our mod pack the New Horizons mod for Pirates of the Caribbean, and technically we never quite finished that one. We're still working on build 14, but these days, after so many years of development, with first Pirate KK doing a lot of the mod pack compilation, then me doing a bit again for a couple of years, eventually Grey Roger taking over, he's doing it now. We've done so much new development, so much testing, that I'd say it's very playable, very enjoyable. I'm not going to say it's perfect, there will be bugs, there will be rough edges, there was definitely more potential for new stuff, but when people come to our community, we're always happy to help them get the mod working on their computer as much as possible. If people have comments, we're always happy to respond. If we can do something with them, we will. Usually we'll respond with, we'll try to make you do it yourself. And that's basically the way that a community has always been working. People show up, just like I did, just like Grey Roger did, just like Jack Rackham did, just like Bartolomeo Portuguese did, just like all of us did. We came to the community because we liked the game, and eventually we started tweaking something here and there ourselves, and some people left it at that, and some people did a tremendous amount of work, and all together, I dare say it's something that you've got every right to be proud of.
Do you and other main contributors have a programming background, or it was easy to start from scratch without any knowledge in programming?
It's really the amount of people involved in our community over the years is like really, really wide variety. Like we had people who started in IT when IT itself started, like in the 70s, the 80s. They were close to retirement age, so they had plenty of experience. On the other hand, there were rookies, like really young people. Like I joined the community in 2004. What age was I in 2004? I think I was in secondary school, 34. are now. Let me just calculate for 17 years ago. Yeah, I was just about 17, 18 years old when I joined. And at the time, I had done secondary school. It wasn't really a big specific focus on programming in secondary school. My university level education afterwards was focused on how to not crash with your ship into the rocks. So also no programming involved. And so actually, a fair people who joined, like with a younger crowd, we actually joined not having a programming background, but learning by modding the game. Like changing small things in the game is pretty easy, and then you can make it as difficult as you want. Obviously, don't start too difficult. That's always what I tell new people who join the community with really ambitious ideas, like, I want to completely overhaul the game, yay! I say, well, I'm not going to say don't do it, but start with something simple and build it up. But if you do it that way, there's a lot of potential there. And actually, when I started, when I had to do my final thesis of my university level education, I went to do it at the Maritime Research Institute in the Netherlands. And I did my job interview for them. It was a thesis. My supervisor there asked me, so Pieter, are you familiar with MATLAB? My response was literally, Mat what? Yeah, it's a programming thing. Don't worry about it. You'll get used to it. So there I am, first day in the actual real company office, looking at the computer screen with this MATLAB thing in front of my face, trying to make sense of it. And I go like, hold the phone. This is just like Pirates of the Caribbean. It's actually a little bit simpler than Pirates of the Caribbean. So actually, I got off to a running start there. Did a lot of pretty great work there. They were very happy with. Then I went to work at sea, and then by the time that I was nearing the end of my time at sea, for 5 years, it was time for something new. So I sent an email to my supervisor there. Hey Rob, you have a position available. Do you have anything available at Marin again? And in the end, they had, and that's where I'm back working now. So in a way, you could say that I have my current job thanks to Pirates of the Caribbean. In a way, that's actually the truth.
It's interesting how so great job was made by people who have very great ideas but don't have a good IT background, and I think it's incredible that the way how you think and the way how you decided to do it, and you just do it like Nike says. So without any background in gaming or game development, I think it's great.
I absolutely think so as well, and really I'm especially impressed with what some other of our members managed to pull off. Like the way I always talk about Couch Captain Charles, for example, it's like he had these really ambitious ideas that were supposedly completely impossible, and unhindered by any prior knowledge, he just kept at it until he bloody well made it work. And we literally have features in Pirates of the Caribbean New Horizons that the original game developers from Alcala said, sorry, our game engine cannot do that. And we say to them, but it's working. We've got it working. We're very happy with it, the way it works. No, it's not possible. It's not possible. Well, we think it's possible. We can see it right in front of our faces. But okay. So that was like the big one was the direct sail mod, because all the Sea Dogs games, the way they work is you've got part to walk around the shore. You can do sword fights. Then you go to 3D sailing mode, where you can have your sea battles. But to go from one island to another island, you have to go to the world map, which is also quite a lot of fun. But actually, a lot of our players. A lot of feedback from people we got is like, actually, they don't want to use the world map. They just want to go in 3D sailing mode and just point their ship in the direction of the next island and just keep going. Put on a time compression, wait to arrive. And the game couldn't do that. You had to go to the world map. And Couch Captain Charles actually made it work. So you don't have to go to the world map if you don't want to. You can if you want to. You don't have to if you don't want to. You do actually have to reload the scene. But the way it now works is in the background, the game keeps track of your hypothetical world map position while you are in 3D sailing mode. And as you approach another island, you get a message like, you're approaching the next island. And then eventually you are reloaded to the next island, and along the way you can encounter other ships, you can encounter rafts in the sea, you can encounter sometimes mines, be careful of those, and it's also the random stuff that you can encounter without using the world map. And that was quite a big feature that Couch Captain Charles added, and made a lot of people very, very happy. Another example that I myself managed to do is we had 4 members. She called herself Snow White Sorrow. think she was from Asia, and she had this idea that the ship handling was not realistic enough in the game, so she tweaked the numbers, really put a lot of effort into those numbers, and made the ship handling in realistic game mode a lot different than it was before, and very interesting, very close to real life, or the way real life was supposed to have been, according to her understanding. And I think she was pretty darn close, I think. And one of the things she realized while doing that was that actually you could fake something like a steamship. She realized there were two numbers for ships, like the angle to the wind direction where you go the fastest, and the angle to the wind direction where you lose all speed. By tweaking those numbers, she could make a ship that was very close to similar speed regardless of wind direction. Still, if there was more wind, the ship would go faster, and if you were going straight in the wind, you would still stop. But basically, between 15 degrees either side of the wind direction, you could do whatever you wanted, and you weren't affected by the wind too much. And then basically you have kind of like a steamship. So we put in some particle effects to fake the steam engine, and there you go. We suddenly had a steamship in the game, completely fake. Then one day I'm messing around with the console and I press a button and my ship starts moving forward. And it was the rotation impulse around the Z-axis, which to me sounds like a rotation and not a movement. But I put that in the game and suddenly my ship is moving forwards. And I realized, holy crap, I just discovered the engine, like the literal engine in the engine. So it didn't take much longer before I had linked keyboard commands to it. And if you try the steamships in New Horizons now, you can actually furl all the sails, switch on the engine and sail around without using the sails at all. And it works. It's basically like having a real steamship. And if there's no wind at all, you can still move forward on that steam engine. That was something like, I don't know if the original game developers put that in there on purpose. As far as I'm aware, I don't think so, but we made use of it and it absolutely works.
Do you know who had mines in a game that you mentioned before?
Oh, the mines? That was Couch Captain Charles as part of his direct sail mod. He figured you shouldn't just be able to sail from one island to another island. It should also be not boring while you do so. So he put all sorts of random encounters in the middle. And one of those were the mines. When he did that, you can encounter the mines randomly, which is a bit of a disadvantage. At the same time, he figured just adding a disadvantage, that's not fun. You have to also add an advantage. So he said, okay, you can randomly run into mines. However, you can also take some of the gunpowder that Maximus added to the mod a couple of years before, put those in a barrel, put a fuse on them, leave it behind your ship and leave mines yourself. So what you can actually do in the game in New Horizons, you can pass closely in front of an enemy ship, drop a mine behind you just as you're passing, and then have the other ship crash into the mine and like half blow up or something.
Yeah, it's interesting mode. We don't have on Russian community, but for the mines, I would say that Alexis B made also the same modification. It was his last modification for the Seaward.
Like when I joined the community, Seaward was our Russian brothers, so to say. Like they were doing the same thing that we were, just with their own people in their own way, in their own language. And we were communicating back and forth a bit. I think some of their members were members at PiratesAhoy as well. I'm not sure if any Western PiratesAhoy members were members at Seaward. I don't think so. But I think it was the Sea Legend is Back mod that they were working on at the time, which is also for Pirates of the Caribbean. I think it was Alexis. And as I mentioned also earlier, we were in contact and we got permission from them to use their resources, so their 3D models, their textures in our mod. And that's what we did. And I can't remember, but I think we also told them that they could use some of our stuff. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I'm not entirely sure. They might have done. But yeah, definitely we were in touch here and there. And then later, many years later, when Age of Pirates 2 City of Abandoned Ships was released, by that time, of course, Seaward had gone from a modding community to a commercial game development company. And then we were actually in contact with Edward Zaitsev. And again, he gave us a lot of help, gave us the plugin for Maya to export our own 3D models and some other tools, and remembering animation view. He gave us a Word document with hints on how to use the Maya export plugin for ships and for characters, and that really allowed us to do a lot more work, a lot more fancy work than we did before. And actually he also gave us the source engine of Age of Pirates 2, and unfortunately we never quite managed to put this as good use as we wanted to. So we always had a dream of porting Pirates of the Caribbean to the newer version of the Storm engine instead of the Storm 2 engine, and some work has been done on that, but never quite reached the point that we wanted it to. And well, maybe in the future. I mean, the future isn't written, so who knows what happens. But for now, New Horizons still runs on the original Storm 2 engine.
Do you know how many users now play New Horizons?
No numbers whatsoever. All I know is that's literally what I'm doing right now. Let me just look at the number of downloads on ModDB. That's usually an indication that I like. Let's see, and here on the extra fixes archive that was posted on February 4th, 2020, an update on January 13th this year has 2,200 downloads. So I think it's fair to say that on the whole, I don't know, maybe some people downloaded it twice, but I think it should be fair to say at least that we have 1,000 players over the past year. Look at other files. I see here build 14 full, 18,500 downloads. Then build 14 beta 3.4, 29,000 downloads. And that's the one other thing that we can check. Checking build 13, 42,000 downloads.
It's a lot.
So at the height, we've had several tens of thousands downloads at least, and I assume that means also players. These days, obviously, we're 17 years later now, but still 1,000, I think it's safe to say, 1,000 or more. All things considered, I'd say it's a respectable player base.
On Mod website, there was no big update from 2018 till 2021. What you have done for this period? Why you didn't publish new versions of? Why didn't you publish any new big updates for the New Horizons?
Well, basically what happened is that when I was working at sea myself, for 8 months a year, I did not have time for modding at all. Other people were doing it. But for 4 months a year, I was at home basically with nothing much to do, so I had all the time in the world. When I started working ashore, suddenly I had a regular full-time job. I was working 5 days a week and sitting behind the computer all day. And then for 2 days a week at the weekend, I would go to my parents' Lelystad a lot. And suddenly, when I was in my spare time, I didn't really feel that much like doing a lot of computer work anymore. And then I bought a boat, a sailboat of my own. And suddenly I just didn't have the time at all anymore. And I moved houses 2 or 3 times within the space of a couple of years. So I didn't have time for much of anything anymore, just making the occasional post on the forum, and that was about it. So progress slowed down a bit. Thankfully, it did not actually stop. And certainly attention to public relations was not the same that it was when I had all the time in the world to spare. So thankfully, Grey Roger actually kept the updates going all those years. And it's only been the last year or so, also thanks to one of our new members, the Nameless Pirate he calls himself, and he actually started helping me build up the public relations again. So it's not actually the case that nothing happened in those years. Actually, plenty of things happened in those years. We just didn't post them to ModDB, so it was a bit invisible to a lot of people that things were actually still happening. It's a bit unfortunate for those players, but yeah, if you're working with pure freelance people, if the people who are freelance available don't care about posting stuff to ModDB and they just want to make their own mods, it's their spare time, it's their right to spend it whichever way they choose, right?
Yeah. And do you have any plans to continue New Horizons Remastered, and why development was stopped?
So yeah, it's quite the big story there. So at some point during the development of Pirates of the Caribbean New Horizons, we figured this is so ambitious, like why don't we start our own indie game? And actually we tried to make that happen. We had the Hearts of Hoge Conquest of the Seas project, and we had a lot of people involved and from all over the world. We had 3D modelers, texture artists, terrain artists, composers, all sorts of people involved, and the intention was to make completely for free the most awesome, ambitious single-player pirate game the world has ever seen. You might recognize this as being a really ambitious thing to do for even a studio with a big budget, and our budget was zero, absolutely zero. So we tried different game engines, and we first tried the Cry engine, and then we eventually had to switch to the Unity engine, and we are actually making some very good progress, but it was really difficult to get like the awesome things that people were doing and getting them to really mesh together into one functioning whole. And as that kept proving more and more difficult, which is understandable considering that AAA companies, again, they do these things for a living for astronomical budgets, for more budgets than they make like Hollywood movies for. And we were trying to do it completely freelance. So we tried to take some donations, and actually the biggest donation, I can tell you who made the biggest donation, and it was me. And we really tried to make that work. But in the end, it started slowing down a bit. People starting to get a bit discouraged. Then two of our members, Captain Murphy and Flannery, decided to try and switch and make their efforts commercial. So they did a lot of work on that, and they were making pretty good progress together. And that's when a hurricane in Florida hit Captain Murphy's house. It was a couple of years back, and I think he still hasn't recovered. At the same time, one of our other big contributors, Armada, he's called on our forums, he was doing a lot of great work on Hearts of Oak. And as Hearts of Oak started to become a bit too ambitious, he figured, okay, let's tone it down a bit. Let's try to do something that's more realistic to accomplish with just like a small, tiny, one or few people team. That's when he basically, by himself, with a little bit of support from Captain Murphy and Flannery, set up the New Horizons Remastered project. And the idea of that was basically, let's try and take the functionality from Pirates of the Caribbean, the original Pirates of the Caribbean, not even with much of the New Horizons features added, just a base game, just a stock game. And he said, okay, let's try to bring that to Unity. And he did actually succeed to make a demo release. And in the demo release, you can walk around Redmond Port, Jamaica now in New Horizons, but in the original game, Redmond Port, you can walk around, you can go into your ship's deck, you can go into 3D sailing mode. I think you can fire your cannons, you can do a little bit of simple sword fighting, and it was a very simple demo, but really all the bare bones for a pirate game were actually there. But as it so happened, Armada was doing professional game development studies at the time, and as he finished his studies, obviously you want to have a job, needs to pay the bills. They're not going to pay themselves. You can't just for free go and make a pirate game. And so he had to stop developing New Horizons Remastered and focus on something else. And he ended up working at this indie game studio. It's called Skyward Digital. And I'm not entirely sure if it was a company that already existed or it is actually a company that he started with some of his friends and fellow students. But if you really want to know about that, for sure, have an interview with him as well. I think he would might just be quite happy to talk about his side of the story. But the game they were working on was actual medieval RPG. And let me just quickly look it up. Sorry, I'm silent while I'm just looking it up. So it was called RPG Merchant, and you can buy it on Steam, I think. And they released it, but it didn't really meet with quite the success that they had hoped for. And the game, as far as I understand, is a pretty decent game. They didn't spend a lot of time and effort and budget on promoting the game. And well, you know as well as I do, you can make the best thing on planet Earth. If nobody knows about it, nobody's going to care. So now with that project finished, available for people to try, they're now working on their new project. And their new project, as it so happens, is a pirate game. It's called Buccaneers, and it features 4 different factions. You can play as pirates, obviously. You can play as the English, the French, and the Spanish. And last week, they released to Steam their first playable demo last week, and I tried it for the first time. And you can really see the influence of the original Pirates of the Caribbean, which is not much of a surprise because one of the big developers there is Armada, who first worked very hard on Pirates of the Caribbean New Horizons, then worked very hard on Hearts of Oak Conquest deceased, then made New Horizons Remastered and is now doing Buccaneers. So basically, Buccaneers is as close as you can get to a New Horizons Remastered indie game. The only thing is, it's got quite a different art style. It's got like a pixel graphics kind of art style, because they really have a small team and they really do want to deliver the game and accomplish their goals. And basically, they've learned from all our years at the PiratesAhoy community that the more ambitious your goals, the less likely that you're going to achieve them. And achieving the goals is more important than achieving ambitious goals. You can always achieve a simple goal first and then go more ambitious later, but don't bite off more than you can chew. So for all people doing anything with really anything out there, have your ambition, but at the same time, be careful. Do not bite off more than you can chew. Do things in steps. Start with the basics, build things up, and that's what we did also with Pirates of the Caribbean New Horizons. Like the first mods that were done for the game, they were really simple. They were taking the finished stuff from the game and finishing it up, and taking the rough edges from the original game, and polishing it up a little bit. As people started building on it and building, the amount of content that was added, the amount of differences to the original game, the amount of structural reworkings ended up being quite astronomical, and you can really see it as like an exponential curve. At the start, it seems like you're barely making any progress, but at the end, it's really impressive what you can accomplish if you can just do a little bit here and there, don't give up, and keep going for many, many years. And it's really the way that great things can be made to happen, I believe.
I agree with you. And since Pirates of the Caribbean, do you play any other games?
So I myself, before Pirates of the Caribbean, I played some games, and my favorite games were Indiana Jones games, some real-time strategy games. I can mention some titles, but maybe not quite relevant. Virtual Sailor, I played for a little bit. And actually, as I played Pirates of the Caribbean and got more into the modding, I stopped playing games altogether. So for maybe the 17 years that we spent developing Pirates of the Caribbean New Horizons, I think 10 of those years I spent really primarily modding the game, and a lot of the features in Pirates of the Caribbean New Horizons, I never actually properly played with them myself. I just made sure that other people could play with it. Really only 2 years ago, when my little brother encouraged me to buy a PlayStation 4, and that's actually when I started playing games again. So now I finally have some more actual gamer experience again, and the main games that I've been enjoying over the years is, let's start by mentioning Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, which is of course the #1 big famous Western pirate game. And when it was released, the people at the PiratesAhoy community, I've got to admit, we were very much making fun of it for how unbelievably arcadey it was, and like the speedboat method of sailing around in that game. I figured, at some point I have to play it. So I've played it. I've got to say that there is a lot to be enjoyed about that. At the same time, I really wish that there was some sort of mix between that game and Pirates of the Caribbean New Horizons. Like, take those two things and mash them together. I think then you really have quite a stunning game. Also in the same series, Assassin's Creed, the only other game that I played is Origins, which is set in ancient Egypt. And from my side, it's actually quite a big step forward from Black Flag. It was made by the same team, I believe. And for me, it's much closer to like a believable game world. It feels much less gamey. And actually the world, I was really impressed with the attention to detail. Walking around in Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, I feel like I'm walking around a video game world. If I walk around in Assassin's Creed Origins, I feel like I'm walking around ancient Egypt, and there's people on the streets going about their business and doing all sorts of things that aren't even remotely important for the gameplay, but it really makes you feel like these are real people in the real world. At some point, I had my family visit me, and I was showing them Assassin's Creed Origins, and we realized that in one of the theaters there was literally a theater group pantomiming some plays, literally like you're in a theater and you could watch the plays, and they were literally acting out stories without talking, and there were 3 distinct different stories, very much appropriate for the time time setting very much related to the story of the game. But if you're a player, if you're a regular arcade player and you just rush through things, you wouldn't ever notice that. But that's the amount of attention to detail that they put in there, and I was well impressed. Another game that I quite enjoyed was The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. CD Projekt Red doing a really impressive job, and I played that, and really the attention to detail there is also amazing, I think. I do think they went overboard here a little bit, like the crafting system, dear lord. Spent like half an hour at a time and just in the menu trying to get my new armor. That's not really what I personally enjoy doing, but it's definitely well done. But the main thing that I appreciated in The Witcher 3 was just the characters and the friends to the main character Geralt, and how they keep coming back, like how they really have distinct personalities, and you keep interacting with them and you can make different choices, and it has some sort of impact on the game world. At the same time, you had all those side quests with also distinct characters, and you really feel like it's quite a believable game world with distinct stories. And I think especially like the storytelling, it's like several interactive books wrapped into one. I was quite impressed with that one. Then other games I played, actually the whole reason I bought the PlayStation 4 in the first place is so I could play the Uncharted series. It's quite a different sort of game. There's basically no RPG element whatsoever, just pure action adventure, but also is story based, and I really enjoyed that. And other than that, I've been enjoying quite a lot of the Star Wars games throughout the years. So yeah, that's a bit of the stuff that I'd say was worth my time.
Have you heard an attempt to develop a new Sea Dogs 4 in 2018?
Actually, there was two things that I knew of, because already many years before that, Edward Zaitsev from Seaward contacted us asking about Corsairs 4, I think he called it at the time, because of course the game series called Sea Dogs / Age of Pirates / Pirates of the Caribbean in the Western world is called Corsairs, I believe, in Russia. So they wanted to develop Corsairs 4, and I think it was not the Unity engine. Maybe you can help me here. It was the other one, not CryEngine.
Unreal Engine?
I do believe so, yeah. I believe there was Unreal Engine that ending to work on. And so they had basically the ambitious intention of making our dream game, making like the next-gen version of the Sea Dogs games. And what Edward Zaitsev was hoping for is to make a game that was not just successful in Russia, where I believe pirate gaming is quite popular, but also in the Western world, where it doesn't seem to be too much of a big thing. As far as I can tell, in the Western world, there's a lot of interest in sci-fi stuff, a lot of stuff interest in horror, adventure hero too, fantasy, lots and lots of fantasy. But pirates, it's really once in a while something piratey shows up, but it's not really something that keeps going. It's a bit unfortunate, I think, because it's really like a big gap, because the way I see it, a really truly well done pirate game, why should a really truly well done pirate game not be on the same level as other popular games out there like Witcher or Horizon Zero Dawn or Spider-Man, or I can't think of any reason why not, but it's not there at the moment. But Edward Zaitsev had the wish of making that happen, so he contacted us, and actually we still have a hidden subforum on PiratesAhoy with all the discussions that we had about this game. And actually, let me have a quick look where it's hiding these days. Nope, that's not where it is. Oh yeah, it's in the archives, of course. Regular visitors to the forums will not be able to see this, but it does actually exist. In our archives, we've got a subforum called Former Corsairs 4 Discussions, 11 different threads and 258 messages. That was basically between our community and Edward Zaitsev to do a brainstorming of how we as Western pirate gamers look at the series, what we think would be interesting, how things might be different from Russia. And those discussions, they still exist. And then I think was it last year or 2 years ago indeed, I saw a little bit of a resurgence about Corsairs 4, which apparently had been taken over by Blackmark, and they had the intention of making it happen. But by the time actually the news reached my attention, apparently it has already been put on the back burner again. They had apparently tried to do some crowdfunding in the background, and I was actually interested. I would have been quite willing to donate to them, but by the time I actually figured out it was possible to donate, it wasn't possible anymore. So, okay, yeah, that was a bit of an interesting thing. So,
Peter, I am very grateful for your time. I think it was a great interview and I learned a lot from you. And I hope that you will achieve, you and the team and whole community will achieve new goals and you will have new versions of the New Horizons. And also, I hope that Armada will achieve the goals and we will see the release in Steam of a new game. Thank you for your time and hope to see you soon.
Okay, you're very welcome.